Good morning, everyone. We are going to begin our service this morning with our opening song provided by Lynn Israel with her pre-recorded video performance. So take it away, Lynn.
Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you.
Thank you, Lynn. So good morning again, everyone. I am Megan Rancier, and I will be presenting service today along with Tom Edge. Robin Perry and Kevin McClooney are providing technical assistance. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. We're glad that we can keep in touch and support our community, even if we can't be together in person. Please be aware that we are recording this service, and it will be posted on our Facebook and YouTube pages. Also, we will be having a brief congregational meeting after service today. Please plan to stay after service for 10 or 15 minutes so that we can have as many congregation members present as possible. And thank you in advance. We joined together this morning to seek justice, equality, and fairness in the world. Our hearts are touched by the human need we feel around us, whether far away or within reach of our hands. We come here to be together because this is how we believe our lives are best lived. In questioning and in conversation, in compassion and in service, in gratitude and in joy, in companionship and in love. It is good to be together with you this morning. Please take a moment to think of all your friends at MVUUC. Greet them with a comment in the chat box, and remember that you can still reach out to them through email, phone, social media, or video chat. Physical distancing does not need to mean emotional distancing. Let us support one another. Visitors, as we are a diverse group with varying interests and beliefs, our services are varied in format, tone, and topic. We encourage you to view several services to gain a good understanding of our congregation. If you'd like to begin to receive our weekly email newsletter, please email us at news, N-E-W-S, @mvuuc.org. MVUUC remains committed to supporting our members and friends through this difficult time of social distancing. For that reason, we're coordinating assistance with groceries, phone calls, and other needs. If this sounds like something that would be helpful to you, please send an email to SAC, that's S as in Sam, A as in Apple, C as in cat, @mvuuc.org with your name and what kind of assistance you would like to request. Now is the time for announcements. Announcements can be sent ahead of time to services@mvuuc.org to be read. If you have an important announcement now, you can raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of the participant box in Zoom. Then we will announce your name and turn on your microphone and camera so you can make your announcement yourself. So Robin, are there any announcements today?
Winnie says that she has an announcement, so I am going to put her camera on and ask her to unmute. There you are, Winnie.
Okay. Hi. Fine. I just wanted to announce that we are going to start the Spirit in Practice program. You may remember it had, I think, one session back in February when we were still meeting face to face. Things kind of ended after that when the services in person ended. But we would like to restart it. It will, of course, be online. There are 10 sessions or 10 workshops that you can participate in. You don't have to participate in all of them, but it's encouraged that you participate in as many as you can. We have 6 or 7 people that I know of so far that are interested. We'd love to have a few more. If you would like to participate, please notify me at winrexx@gmail.com. There is more information in the newsletter as well as a link to a flyer about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. It does not seem to be any more announcements.
Okay. I'll also take this opportunity to make a plug for the Anti-Racist Book Club. We've been meeting every week or every 2 weeks, and our next meeting will be this Thursday at 7 p.m. through Zoom. We'll be continuing to read from Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And you can email me if you'd like to join us. That is sac@mvuuc.org. And then I wasn't sure where to put this, but it's not really an announcement, it's more of an acknowledgement that this evening at sundown begins Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement and the holiest day of the Jewish year, which will continue until sundown tomorrow. So I just want to wish all of our Jewish brothers and sisters an easy fast. So.
The chalice will be lit today by Megan Ranciere. Please join me in reading the words for the chalice lighting that appear as a comment in the chat box. We are gathered here and now. For a moment, we've stopped working, studying, doing dishes. There are no tasks, no emails, no phone calls. We are gathered to feel closer to each other, to feel closer to ourselves, to feel closer to our deepest inspiration, the stream of life that runs through our body and runs through the world. May we be opened to see and hear in each other what our souls want to say.
And now we will have a musical performance by Ruth DeBro in her recorded rendition of Come Sing a Song with Me. And feel free to sing along with the lyrics that are posted in the chat box.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find.
Thank you, Ruth. So our opening words today come from psychologist Tanya Byron, and it starts with a quote. Quote, "We live in a decaying age. Young people no longer respect their parents. They are rude and impatient. They frequently inhabit taverns and have no self-control." End quote. These words, expressing the all too familiar contemporary condemnation of young people, were actually inscribed on a 6,000-year-old Egyptian tomb. Later, in the 4th century BC, Plato was heard to remark, quote, "What is happening to our young people? They disrespect their elders. They disobey their parents. They ignore the law. They riot in the streets, inflamed with wild notions. Their morals are decaying. What is to become of them?" End quote. And then, a few hundred years later, in AD 1274, Peter the Hermit joined the chorus. Quote, "The young people of today think of nothing but themselves. They have no reverence for parents or old age. They are impatient of all restraint. As for the girls, they are forward, immodest, and unladylike in speech, behavior, and dress." End quote. Such quotes illustrate what I believe has become a historically nurtured and culturally damaging phenomenon, ephebiphobia, the fear of youth. But today, this problem is worse than ever. Our distorted perception of young people creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why bother to try when you are told that you are a failure? Why bother to strive when your existence is seen as a nuisance?
I'm going to come clean with you this morning. This talk is in no small way a shameless plug. I wanted my listeners to be prepared for that, so that perhaps you will not think less of me when it happens. And of course, thank you in advance for your understanding. It's hard to believe that it's been 6 months since I presented to this congregation at the outset of the pandemic on how we need to change our views on aging. Back in March, I asked you to consider why do we place ourselves and one another into strict boundaries as we grow older? Why don't we grant one another the freedom we often associate with youth? The freedom to adapt, to change our minds, to learn and try new things. And I wondered how we would view ourselves differently as we aged if we permitted ourselves the necessary room to continue growing rather than simply growing up. In our opening words today, British educator and psychologist Tanya Byron worries that we are already imposing similar limits on our young people. Now, she wrote this piece 2 years ago before a worldwide pandemic severely impacted all of our lives. But in 2018, she worried that we spend so much time making decisions about young people's lives based on fear. Byron argued that we have imposed harsh regimentation in our educational systems, and that children who cannot thrive in those settings are negatively labeled and left behind. The ideas that we associate with youth, playfulness, creativity, energy, change, experimentation, are lost in the process, along with children's curiosity, hope, and wonder. Now, generally speaking, I agree with Dr. Byron's arguments about the impact of this regimentation in the lives of young people. But I would also take it a step further. With older people, we limit their room for growth while looking to them for leadership based on their lived experiences. With younger people, we limit their room for growth in large part by failing to acknowledge that they can be experts on their own lives. This does not mean that young people have all the answers about their existence. Like the well-meaning adults who try to guide them through life, kids have much to learn. But it means that we, as adults, would do well to listen to their perspectives on the lives they lead. We can at least take some solace from Dr. Byron today. The adults of 2020 are part of a long and proud tradition of misunderstanding young people. For at least the last 8,000 years, across every continent and country, adults have waged this battle against the impertinence of youth. As an educator, I have had more than my share of moments when I curse young people, especially those who cannot bother to read a syllabus, and wonder what is wrong with them. Think of how many of us trade frustrating or embarrassing stories of our own kids, how we laugh or roll our eyes at their exploits, how we dismiss their silliness or immaturity. Now, sometimes we're lucky enough to recognize how wonderful it all is and actually celebrate their youthfulness. Sometimes we recognize the genius inherent in their logic and their worldviews. Sometimes we recognize pieces of ourselves in them. And it serves as a much needed reminder that we are not quite so different from them after all. But what if we did more than that? What if we really listened to young people and took direction from them? Now, I know what you're thinking, and don't worry, I'm not asking kids to be in charge of every major decision. I know that we can't have pizza for every meal of every day. I know that we can't always drop what we're doing to play or nap, as much as a nap sounds really nice. And I know that if you have to watch that one movie they've had on a loop since March one more time, you're going to lose it. Between those kinds of requests, however, there are other messages that we sometimes miss. Messages that reflect just how much young people understand the world around them and are actively trying to change it for the better. Early this year, my friend Cassie shared with me a play that she wanted to direct this year for Horizon Youth Theater. Warning, we are currently entering the shameless plug zone. Proceed with caution. The play, Michael Slade's And a Child Shall Lead, is based upon interviews with survivors of Terezin, a cross between a concentration camp and a ghetto outside of Prague during the Holocaust. Terezin was known as a place where the Nazis sent large numbers of artists, musicians, and intellectuals. The inmates created a vibrant cultural life in spite of the limitations imposed upon them. In this play, we get some insight into how this affected the experiences of children. We get to watch them wrestle with the same questions and challenges facing the adults. Questions of resistance, of survival, and of maintaining one's humanity through unimaginable suffering. While the characters in the play are composites of many real-life people, they give us so much insight into the workings of young people's minds. Among other things, we see how quickly they come to understand the serious situation in which they find themselves. They recognize what they've already lost and what they still stand to lose. Within Terezin, they are still growing children, worried about their families, missing life before the roundup, but experiencing these things side by side with everything we consider normal for their ages. As their physical worlds become more confined, their inner worlds continue to expand. And each, in their own way, finds room to fight back and maintain some shred of themselves. I hope that some of you will be able to support HYT's first production in nearly a year and tune into our streaming performances, October 8th through 11th. Don't worry, I'll provide links soon. More than this, whether or not you can watch the show, I want you to think of the lessons we can take, especially in how we view the lives of young people. Some will watch a show like this, shake their head and say, it's such a shame that these kids had to grow up so fast, that they couldn't have a normal childhood. Maybe there's another way to view it. Maybe we could start by asking ourselves, how many millions of children are born into circumstances that make it difficult, if not impossible, to live a normal childhood today? Their conditions may not be as extreme as those in Terezin, but how many children today are born into modern concentration camps? How many are born into segregated ghettos? How many grow up in conditions of poverty, exacerbated by racism, sexism, religious intolerance, and growing class inequality? Of course, as adults, we should be horrified by those thoughts and working to change those conditions at all levels of society. In doing so, however, we do not have to make these changes for the sake of the children. We can do this work side by side with them. And if history, including recent history, is any indication, there are plenty of young people who are up to this challenge and ready to take the lead themselves, if we are not sufficiently prepared for that task. You are already familiar with some of the best examples I can provide. You already know of Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani activist who began her advocacy for women's education with a blog at the age of 11, survived a shooting at 15, and became a Nobel Peace Prize winner at 17 years old. You already know of Greta Thunberg, who began her environmental activism in earnest at 15 years old, sparked worldwide student protests on the issue of climate change, and addressed the United Nations Climate Change Conference. You may know about Mari Coppeney, also known as Little Miss Flint, and Autumn Peltier, a First Nation activist from Northern Ontario, both of whom have been at the forefront of fights for clean drinking water. We could literally spend all morning listing the contributions of youth activists today. Jazz Jennings and Desmond Napoles for LGBTQ issues, Isra Hirsi and Zia Bastida on climate change, Emma Gonzalez and Jacqueline Corin on gun violence, Amika George on period poverty, Spar Shah on disability rights. We can look at so many examples of young people actively taking the lead in helping us to recognize the most important issues of our time and move in the direction of justice. Just as our negative attitudes towards youth are nothing new, neither is youth activism and leadership. Some of them have been inspired by their experiences as students. In Great Britain, 109 years ago this month, thousands of school children walked out of their classrooms in protest of corporal punishment, demanding more humane treatment from teachers and a shorter school day. Barbara Johns, a high school student in Virginia, led protests against her own segregated school district in Virginia in the late 1940s, and in the process helped to initiate one of the 5 lawsuits that came together under the ruling of Brown versus Board of Education. In 1964, nearly 500,000 Black and Latino students walked out of their schools in New York City protesting against segregated education and a lack of adequate resources for students of color. Survivors of the 2018 school shooting in Parkland, Florida, became known and heard worldwide for using that experience to call for political action on gun violence. More often than not, however, they looked at their everyday lives and demanded substantive changes. Some of their names are lost to history, but their causes economic exploitation, the environment, civil rights, gender equity, and so many others continue in our own times. What's more, their inspiration lived on beyond their initial protests. The children who faced police dogs and fire hoses in 1963 had no way of knowing how their actions would impact the adoption of federal civil rights laws in 1964 and 1965. Teens and young adults from Greensboro to Soweto, from Tiananmen Square to Tehran, helped to shape the modern world and reveal the pressing issues of the day. Now, this does not take away from the work that so many adults are already engaged in, the work they are doing on these same issues every day. Still, we can take a lesson from these young activists when we look at their passion, their commitment, and their fundamental belief in the possibility of change. They're not calling for vague notions of change, devoid of connection to a larger agenda. Rather, they are often setting forth tangible ideas that we can follow, a roadmap to a better future, their future. As Greta Thunberg said, quote, "Once we have action, there is hope everywhere." She called upon people to move beyond a simple discussion of hope as the basis for planning and move into action, giving that hope form and direction. I guess the real question before us then is whether we as adults are confident enough in ourselves and in the next generation to listen to what young people have to say and perhaps fall in behind them. That would require us to overcome so many of our assumptions and prejudices towards younger generations. Nate Turner, in a 2018 talk, confronted his adult peers about their idea, IDEA, of what it means to be a member of Generation Z. I for impatient, D for distracted, E for entitled, A for apathetic. Turner said that if these things are true, they are a reaction to the mess that we have created for them, a reflection of the world we shaped. He believes rather than attacking young people for who they are, we owe them an apology for the world we have given them. In the end, we owe them much more than an apology. We owe them a new idea of how to live in the world today and how to change it. We owe them our patience as they grow into their own leadership roles and a shared impatience with the rate of change. We owe them our attention, even amid our current distractions, as they try to tell us what is wrong from their perspectives. We owe them the resources to create positive, substantive changes in their own lives and for the larger society. And we owe them our passion and commitment, our allegiance in a common struggle for a better world. Without giving too much away, for those who see the show in a few weeks, hint, hint, the children of Terezin in the play and in real life created their own newspaper. They secretly interviewed other inmates and tried to document the conditions in which they lived. Deep down, they hoped that if they could get the newspaper in the right hands, people would listen and act. Above all, they thought that the only reason they could still be there is that others were unaware of the full horrors they faced. In our own time, will you listen to the next generation? Will you believe them when they tell you something is wrong? Will you act with and for them? Perhaps looking back, I did not pick the best title for this talk, "And a Child Shall Lead." They are already speaking to us. They are already challenging us. They are already leading us. Hopefully, we are strong enough to follow them. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So this is a UU principal connection. I was truly inspired by Tom's reflection for today's service and realizing how many amazing young leaders we have in our world and what they've accomplished really does give me hope. I also wanted to add to Tom's excellent list of youth leaders, Claudette Colvin, who, her refusal to leave the bus actually helped to spark the Montgomery bus boycotts, even before Rosa Parks. And she was only 15, Claudette Colvin. So in connecting Tom's reflection with our UU principles, I decided to focus on 3 of them. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, principle 1, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, principle 4, and the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, principle 6. Recognition that our young people are deserving of a respectful and supportive community rather than dismissive and patronizing authority figures is a core factor in creating a solid foundation for nurturing the future leaders of the world, our world. After all, if we don't teach our young people that they are worthy of dignity and respect, then how can we expect them to have the self-confidence necessary to forge ahead with an innovative idea or to believe in a cause so deeply that they decide to lead a fight against injustice? If we are willing and able to show our young people that we value them and respect them as people who have the capacity to make a meaningful impact on the world, then we will also help them to pursue their own responsible search for truth and meaning in their own lives. Imagine how our collective efforts toward creating a world rooted in peace, liberty, and justice for all would thrive from the energy, enthusiasm, and ingenuity of a generation of youth who are not only inspired to make a difference, but are also strengthened by the knowledge that they have a community who will stand by them, not in front of them or over them, as collaborators in a holistic effort to address past wrongs and make them right. Especially for our youth who are female, people of color, LGBTQ, non-binary, youth with disabilities, and youth from other minoritized populations, we need to provide community in the form of support and affirmation. Because, of course, we should protect them. That should go without saying. But we should also empower them to take on the challenges of the world in their own ways and on their own terms. Because, after all, it's their world that they're fighting for. Thank you. Now more than ever, we are counting on your pledge payments and donations to help sustain and strengthen this congregation that is so important to all of us, supporting our efforts to be a community of love, truth, justice, and service. Please click on the link in the chat box or scan the QR code, which you will see shortly, and be sure to select the correct designation on the drop-down box when you donate. And thank you. And now we will have a video performance by Lynn Israel with hymn number 360, Here We Have Gathered. Please feel free to sing along with the lyrics posted in the chat box.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
Today's closing words come from educator and youth rights activist John Holt in his book, How Children Learn. All I am saying in this book can be summed up in 2 words: trust children. Nothing could be more simple or more difficult. Difficult because to trust children, we must first learn to trust ourselves. And most of us were taught as children that we could not be trusted. Please join me in reading the words for extinguishing our chalice that can be found in the comments in the chat box. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
After the service, we will have a brief congregational meeting, and we will turn on all cameras and microphones. So please make sure that you stay for our meeting, and please be patient, as turning on the cameras must be done one at a time, and it can take a few minutes to get to everyone. And now for our closing song, let us sing Go With a Song in Your Heart. You can find the words as a comment in the Zoom chat box. Go with the song. So that's the end of service, but please stay for our congregational meeting. It won't take too long. We just need to vote on one issue. So please stick around and be patient as Robin turns on your cameras and microphones, and we'll try to get this wrapped up.